Greetings and welcome to Outlaw Gamer Radio, the official podcast of OutlawGamers.com. This is the show where we live to play and play to live. I'm Britt Adams, joined by a man who keeps his artifact of power somewhere that rhymes within his pants, Mr. Lord Baumgarten, Lauren!
What's up, Brent Adams? How are you, my friend?
I don't know where that could be. What's going on?
What rhymes with pants?
I don't know.
That makes me think of the Seinfeld episode. I don't know if you remember that one. Is it Mulva?
It's not
Do you remember when
he's
trying to guess the woman's name and she says it's something that rhymes with the female part of the female anatomy?
Right.
Dolores.
As she storms out the door.
That's exactly right. That's what it makes me think of. Now I'm going to be thinking throughout the entire show, what rhymes with pants?
If you can come up with anything, let me know, and then we'll title the episode that. In the meantime, welcome back, everybody. It's springtime, and you know what that means. Time to get serious about your gaming habits. Now that it's nice and warm outside, it's time to crank up the AC, sit on the couch, and play some video games. No, I'm kidding.
No, you're not, actually.
No,
I mean, really
not kidding.
We could do with some more games in January and February.
I agree. See, that's like the winter months. You're inside anyway, hibernating and shit. Let's talk about the greatest thing that humanity has ever created, ever. And it's first up this week in the garage. That is the announcement trailer for Deus Ex, Mankind Divided, the follow-up to one of my favorite games of last generation, Deus Ex, Human Revolution. Lauren,
I've heard it.
You liked Deus Ex Human Revolution, didn't you?
So let me tell you. So first of all, of course,
I could only to tell me.
I could only think of you when I saw this announcement, and I don't want to get anyone excited, specifically you, but I have re-downloaded Deus Ex Human Revolution, the director's cut, which I don't remember buying, but apparently I did. And I want to start that game and all over and play it through again, just in preparation for Mankind Divided. Although we do not know when Mankind Divided is coming, so they didn't say anything about. They didn't even say like 2016 or 2015, and so we don't know yet if it's a holiday release this year or if it's not coming until next year. But no promises in terms of me finishing Human Revolution. I screwed up big time on that one. I got I think fairly close to the end. And stepped away from it long enough that now I feel like if I want to play it, I really do need to go back and start over. But, Brent, you must be beside yourself with the announcement of this video game, the follow-up to Deus Ex Human Revolution, starring Adam Jensen once again.
None other than Mr. Adam Jensen. I am excited, man. Deus Ex was a really, really cool game. It's not a franchise that I had a lot of history with. I played the first Deus Ex a little bit on PC way back
loved
then.
The first game. Loved it.
But it was one of those really, really pleasant surprises to get into that game last generation. I loved, as I think as I've said several times, the sandbox nature of the mechanics, not the world per se, but the notion of the game presenting you with an obstacle or a problem to solve, and then you have the tools at your disposal to decide how you want to do it. You can tune your upgrades and be very stealth heavy. You can tune your upgrades and be very offensive heavy, or some variation of both. And I love that. I love giving the player the freedom to attack the problem the way that they want to. It made for such compelling gameplay. I just was able to really extract every bit of fun out of that game. I felt like there was to be had, and I think it also is great for multiple playthroughs. So yeah, I'm so excited to see this trailer, and can't wait to actually see a little bit more gameplay and find out more about what we're going to be doing.
Yeah, I'm very excited for it too, Brent. I'm looking for what I'm really looking forward to in Mankind Divided is to see how they improve upon Human Revolution. So there were number one, the graphics. It's such a beautifully conceived world, and I feel like the creators of Human Revolution were a little bit hogtied by the just when they made the game, and I'm really excited to see how this game looks on next gen consoles and on PC. when it comes out. And I'll talk a little bit more about, especially on the heels of something like the Order 1886, which I'll talk about in on the road. But I'm super excited to see how they update this game. I'm very excited that they announced it, and I'm eager. I'm hoping that at E3 we will get some more details about the release of this game.
You and I are going to be sitting right beside each other in that boat. Moving on to the next item in the garage this week, Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, Lauren. What do you think?
Yeah, this was an interesting. So they just put out an official gameplay trailer, which I thought was really interesting. I don't know that I actually think it's erroneously titled, calling it an official gameplay trailer, because it didn't. Certainly, they've put out other media in the past that is really just gameplay, and this is more like kind of like the Wild West series that we saw with Red Dead Redemption.
Going back to our Rockstar Red Dead Redemption roots here,
which I think is brilliant, and to be candid, Brent, was exactly what I needed.
Yes.
Because the fact is I watched this trailer and I walked away from it, and I've decided that I will be picking up that game, as will you, as we talked about.
That's right.
And we're both going to pick it up. I think you're going to. Right now, you were talking about getting on the PC, and I think I'm going to try it on the PS4. And this piece of media was exactly what we needed, and I thought it was a great piece of media. I'm excited to check out the game and see. And see it. It's I think it's going to be one of the bigger releases this year, obviously. And I'm kind of excited to see it on the console. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brent, but Witcher 1 and 2 did not come to the console, correct?
I think they were initially PC-only releases, but maybe they have come out.
Oh, it did. You're right. It came out on Xbox 360.
Yeah, I was thinking that it had come out after the fact on.
Yeah, and I obviously didn't get a chance to play it on the console, but no, I'm very excited to check it out. It's going to be one of the bigger releases this year. I thought this was a great piece of media. If you're on the fence with Witcher 3, I mean, there was some sort of odd stuff in this piece of media. They seem to highlight the nudity or implied nudity and sexual nature kind of early on, which I thought was interesting. But
well, I think the series has always, I think, it's kind of prided itself on having adult sensibilities, and they're wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more, say no more. Does she like photographs? Like, that kind of thing.
Yes.
I think that, I think it's in keeping with what people would expect of the series. I think that, they're being cheeky about it, and, it doesn't, to me, it does not feel like, I don't know, I would not describe it as necessarily exploitative, in nature, the tone of it.
No, I didn't feel it was exploitative. It just seemed like an odd, it seemed a little out of place to me, but it is part of the game. There's no question. And I'm looking forward to this game now, more than I was previously. And for anybody who's on the fence, I think this trailer might be good for you to check out. And as you consider, the game's coming out soon, May 19th.
I am actually right beside you on this. Once again, you and I are in that same boat.
In the boat.
We watched this trailer, and Lauren was just like, get in the boat. Get in the damn boat. And I did. I also was interested in The Witcher. Certainly, when we first heard about this game and found out it was going to be open world, my ears pricked up and said, "Ooh, that sounds very interesting." And of course, I've been playing Skyrim, another open world game with a lot of things to do, things to see, and rich story and all that. And I have to say that as I am probably on the bottom half, on the downhill slope of the main story in Skyrim, and thinking about what I might be moving on to next, I got to say that The Witcher sounds like just the thing I need to get going. This video was a fantastic, as you said, like, this video was the thing that if you're on the fence, that you needed to kind of push you over to the other side, and it did for me as well. I watched this and thought, yeah, that I got to play. That looks really good.
Yep.
So
indeed. All right, Brent. So the third, it's all trailers this week, actually, in the garage, and that's because there's some great trailers out. And we talked about Trine 3 a couple of weeks ago when they announced it, I believe, when they announced it, that it was coming out, and then of course that it was in 3D. It wasn't just a 2.5D side scroller anymore. And now we have exclusive from IGN. Yep. We have 9 minutes of gameplay highlighting all three characters. And it's so good, Brent. I had to put it on here. It's so compelling. And, one of the things I love the most about Trine is that it really is like almost more than any other game I've played. Kind of along the lines of Little Big Planet, kind of along the lines of Puppeteer, but as much or more than those games, it is really like that sort of the storybook whimsy, kind of take in video games, and I love it. I don't think we see enough of it. And watching this and seeing it expanded out to a 3D, a 3D platformer, I guess. Is that what a third-person platform, a puzzle platformer?
Sure, yes.
I'm not even 100% sure how to quantify it, to be honest with you, but
it defies the
quantification
of science.
It is. I don't know how you felt, Brent, but I watched this like jaw agape for 9 minutes, and I am so excited for this game. I hope the first two trines were in 3D, like actual 3D, play with your 3D TV, and I hope that they do that with this game as well. That it's actually 3D, like with 3D glasses, in addition to being a 3D puzzle platformer.
Yes.
But the footage looks so great, Brent. They show all three classes. They show the wizard, they show the rogue, and they show, of course, the knight and the
knight with his parasailing shield.
Yes. It looks like they've integrated so smartly the mechanics of each character in the 3D world.
Yeah.
And what Brent is alluding to is in this gameplay, you see the knight who's always carried a shield in the Trine games. Well, now he can walk sort of backward into the frame in a 3D capacity, and he actually sort of parasails, I suppose. He jumps off a cliff, holds his shield above his head, and will slowly sail down, despite the fact that it's a metal shield that probably weighs 50 pounds and he weighs about 250 pounds. But
it just looks so legit, though. That's the thing. Like you watch that, and you're like, oh, that seems like it would work. I should go try
that. Actually makes sense to that. I could do that.
Yeah, it's great.
Kind of like jumping off of like the top of a house while you're holding 30 balloons should keep you afloat.
Yeah, I mean, why not? I think that, again, I'd have to say that I agree with you. There's a lot of agreeing going on this week. But
yeah, there really is.
It does, man. I mean, it looks so fun. It looks so fun, and it's so interesting to see the way that they have, the way that they've innovated and built on what we've seen in the previous two games. And I thought that this video, just in terms of a piece of media, I thought was a really great way of kind of showing you, here's stuff you'll be doing. Here's all the different kinds of characters that you can play. Here's some of the different things that you'll be doing, and it seemed to me that it was a really, really great a really great way to just engage people and show them why they might be interested in playing your games, and the reasons are legion.
Indeed, they are. It's just it's so unbelievably gorgeous. Again, I encourage you, if you have not played Trine 1 and 2. They deserve your time. It's just unbelievably gorgeous. It's fantastical. It is full of whimsy. It's entertaining
and great gameplay. Great
gameplay. And this just looks like one more a real step forward for the game. And I think it's fantastic. It's coming in 2015. I could not be more excited for this game.
I'm going to go ahead and disagree with you on that, just in case any more agreeing in this segment actually leads to the end of the world. You're welcome. You're all welcome. Welcome back to the clubhouse, everybody. Grab a chair, kick up your feet. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation. But before we do that, shut your pie hole and listen to what my man, Lauren Baumgarten, has to say in regards to what you had to say in regards to last week's subject, which were revealed in the world-famous Outlaw Gamer Radio poll results. Lauren.
That's right, Brent. We took a poll this week again, and we had a lot of users this week talking about how much they enjoyed us discussing game mechanics over industry trends. I feel like, it had been a little while since we talked about mechanics specifically, despite all the wonderful comments about us talking about the game mechanics. Only 66 people, Brent, voted in the poll this week, and I don't know if it was because the poll was leaning so overwhelmingly in one direction and people just didn't feel it necessary, but it was a topic people seemed interested in. The question that Brent posed was this: minimap HUDs, are they ruining games? We were talking about minimaps in the HUD last week and how they affect gameplay, and these were the answers and how they shook out. Coming in third place with just 6% of the vote was I think so. It's just more hand-holding that waters down modern games.
Right.
Coming in second place with 15% of the vote, the answer, no way. They've become an essential game mechanic in today's sprawling titles.
Yep.
And with an overwhelming 79% of the vote was kind of the middle ground where people said, I think some games would benefit in terms of immersion and challenge without them. But the implied rest of that sentence is, but some of them actually need them. So I think it was definitely a very interesting topic. And there were some super, super interesting points made in the comments. I thought it was a fantastic discussion in the comments this week. So thank you guys.
I agree. And I think that this week's topic is kind of similar in that it's an exploration of game mechanic and just, kind of questioning, hey, does this actually add anything to games? And I'll be curious to see if people feel as strongly about what we're going to talk about this week. It's another topic suggested by a listener. This is a comment made by Axehead Alex, and we're talking about looting or scavenging. Here's what they have to say. I also find looting or scavenging breaks immersion. In games like BioShock and The Last of Us, I'm walking around looking at the ground for shit to pick up instead of soaking up the environment and finding the beauty in the game design. I'm finding barrels to break, cabinets to scavenge, and bodies to loot. This is an interesting entry into the topic, given the two titles that
I think you mean entree.
Oh, yes, you're right.
Just kidding.
Oh, now I'm so hungry. Given the fact that he brings up BioShock and The Last of Us specifically, looting is let's face it, it's a big part of a lot of games. I'm playing Skyrim at the moment. Looting is a huge part of Skyrim and a very necessary part. And it's interesting the way that it is interesting the way that looting can work, I think, for and against maybe immersion. Just to kick things off, I think specifically about The Last of Us, I would have to disagree with him on, because I feel that so much of what The Last of Us is about is survival and the effort that survival requires. And so I find the looting in The Last of Us to be a really integral part of the immersion. And the other things that the looting leads to, the fact that the looting leads you to go into all of these houses that used to be occupied by real people. At least that's how it seems, because there's been so much care and thought put into how those houses are set up and the personal effects, the personal notes and things like that are left behind, the pictures on the wall, the sense that you get of the people who lived in that place, and the fact that your survival requires you to go in there, and it sort of constantly reinforces just how bad things are. What has been lost, and why you find yourself in the situation that you are, this incredible loss of life. And so the looting mechanic, I think, is actually key to experiencing those things, which in turn I think are a key part of the immersion in The Last of Us.
So, Brent, let me ask you something before you move on to BioShock.
Yeah.
Specifically about The Last of Us. So you started off by saying that and I think this Last of Us is an excellent example of this. And I'm going to talk about two games that I'm playing currently, Bloodborne and The Order also. But The Last of Us, what you bring up a point about going into the house.
Yeah.
And I remember that. I actually remember that. Obviously I didn't love that game the first time I played it through, but it stood out to me, that sensation of going in these houses and the sensation of like actual people having been there and how empty and alone and how much that reinforced the world. And it was brilliant. It was really, really good in that regard. But you also mentioned that it was kind of, it also reinforced that idea of survival. And when you said that, my first reaction was yes and no. I mean, conceptually, you would think it would, but I feel like DayZ, for example, does a much better job of really creating the sense of survival through a looting mechanic, because it's not common that you find something useful. You find tons of stuff that isn't useful.
Are we talking about in DayZ?
In DayZ, okay, right?
Yeah,
and so it really feels like you're surviving, like you're scrounging. Whereas if I remember, and you might have to correct me, but if I remember, in The Last of Us, items were somewhat ubiquitous. I mean, they weren't like really hard to find. They were the way they were in DayZ, and so I don't remember, you remember there being a real sense of scavenging.
The thing with The Last of Us is kind of like what they're doing in DayZ now, where you found pieces of things. You found bits of metal, or you found cotton wads and things like that you could then craft into useful stuff, whether it was weapons or whether it was things to heal yourself.
Right. No, I remember that.
All
But
that
I guess
kind
my
of stuff.
question was, they didn't. If I don't remember them feeling really sparse. I don't remember really struggling to find
I
stuff.
think that depends on the difficulty level that you play the game at.
Oh, okay.
So
That's possible. I was playing on whatever the default was.
Yeah, so I think that could be a factor, but I'll agree with you in the sense that DayZ is a great example of a game that where looting is, I mean, that is I think the central game mechanic, because that game with the permadeath and whatnot, that game I think goes a long way to discourage you from just actively engaging in combat. So most of what you're doing is kind of sneaking around and looting. And
Well, right, and certainly it's central. But I think
Yeah.
you're so smart to bring up something like The Last of Us, which is, or to talk about something like The Last of Us, because
well, I
the
was
looting
gonna say,
mechanic actually
he was the smart one who brought it
right.
up.
Yeah, no. But it actually, in the case of The Last of Us, it actually, that mechanic is tied to that other thing, which is sort of walking into these houses and seeing the real families. And I think that was vibrant. Now, you were going to talk a little bit about BioShock as well.
Yeah, BioShock is a more interesting example, and of course, now in the case of the first BioShock, the looting, whether or not you loot the little sisters, obviously that's a big mechanic of that game's kind of, I guess, the moral quandary that game presents to the player. So I don't know. I don't know if I quite agree with it. Although, I mean, I get what he's saying. I get what he's saying in terms of I'm not really looking at the beautiful game world that the creators have put together. Now, I'm specifically talking about BioShock now. I'm not really looking at that world. I'm looking down at the ground to see if there's stuff I can pick up. That is Skyrim to me right now. Especially as I'm going through dungeons and things like that, I'm not looking around all that much. I'm looking at the floor primarily for things to pick up or for traps. But again, the thing with Skyrim is that and I don't know, I guess maybe this is a debatable point, whereas I feel that The Last of Us is a little bit more definite. This is perhaps a little bit more diffuse, but for me, the enjoyment out of playing specifically Skyrim is kind of the imaginative kind of role playing going on, and thinking about it being like a really classic, sort of Dungeons and Dragons, Final Fantasy, old school Final Fantasy-esque RPG that is about it's about going into dungeons, looting what's there, fighting monsters, and then coming back with your spoils and selling it off, or using it yourself to upgrade your weapons and armor and all that. I mean it's like really fundamental kind of RPG mechanics. And so I don't know, like maybe not everybody feels that way about Skyrim. Maybe some people play the game and are kind of like, oh come on, I just want to have the story and the conversation trees, and I don't really care about this. So maybe it's just like an angle of the game that I am particularly enamored of. But I don't know. It doesn't bother me there. Although I guess maybe I can concede a little bit more of his point in that specific case, because I agree. I was just in a dungeon earlier this morning doing some stuff, and I couldn't tell you like what it looked like or what I was doing. They all get to looking the same after a while anyway.
But you could tell me if you found the Sword of Garbanthenon, if you had found that.
That I could definitely tell you. Is there an example that you can think of where you agree with him? Is there an example where you can think of a game where you're definitely like, yes, this game suffered because of this?
It's funny because I was literally just thinking this before I read his post.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it. I'll talk a little bit about the two games I'm playing now. But so one of them is The Order 1886, which I just finished. And this may not be the greatest example. It's not a well-reviewed game, but the point is still there. So there's articles strewn throughout the world, and this is a common you see this commonly in games that are supposed to add a little bit of story, right? And so you find these like pieces of paper on a desk or a table, and you pick them up, and in the order they're unbelievably gorgeous and well rendered, and you can read them, or it's a picture of a family, and if you flip it over, it says like Johnny and Billy at the falls in 1942, and it's meant to just add to the world, the story. And in this game they're gorgeously rendered, but what they do is he's right. It's like there's I feel like I have to look everywhere. Every game I play nowadays, every game. I mean, Wolfenstein is a game I love, but like every game I play nowadays, I feel like every room I walk into, I've got to search thoroughly, or I might miss an Easter egg,
Yeah.
or I might miss a weapon.
I feel that as well. I agree with that.
And it's almost every single game. And frankly, until a game proves me otherwise, and frankly, it's somewhat, I think it's distracting and somewhat annoying. So I'm playing Bloodborne, which is, according to most, a wonderful game. And it's a very hard game.
Yeah.
And Bloodborne is a little interesting because from what I can tell in the first... whatever, I don't even know how to describe this game. In terms of hours, it took me 10 hours to play the first level. But then again, the first level isn't really a level because you could have skipped the boss, whatever. I just read an article somewhere that something like 23 of the 32 bosses or something like that in Bloodborne are completely optional, which is insane, which is amazing to me.
Interesting.
But, yeah, it is interesting. But so you have to roll into the barrels throughout the world. And, one time out of 5, there's a coin hidden there. Or, it's called a blood echo, which is a piece of currency in the game. But it's like one time out of 5, but you still feel the need to do it because you never know if you're going to miss some sort of like important thing that you might not, that might be worth a lot of money or whatever. And I don't know. I do find it, I agree. I find it distracting. I feel like I don't know if it's like, I feel like it was original. I don't know if it was originally sort of utilized to try and put little Easter eggs around so people might find them, or to try and maybe enhance to immerse people in the world a little bit more. In some cases, it's used as a methodology for leveling up, where you gather, whether it's animal pelts or string or whatever, and you or money, and you use that to buy or build better items. But at this point, I feel like in literally every game I play, except for example, like the golf club where you're golfing.
Yes.
But any first person or third person shooter, any kind of isometric type of game, they all have this component of make sure you search the entire room, every room. And it sort of artificially extends the game by probably hours, which might be why they do it.
To take more time in each environment.
Right. Or you feel like I'm missing something or giving something up because I don't want to spend all this time searching every goddamn room.
Well, I'm trying to think of games that do involve looting, but where I don't... Borderlands 2. What about Borderlands 2 as an example?
I was going to say Borderlands 2, Diablo 3.
Yeah.
These are games where looting is the central mechanic.
But it doesn't seem to slow down the pace at all in those games. But I think it's because it's not...
it literally is the central mechanic, though. I mean, half of the fun of that game is as much as, I mean, I remember as much as any other part of that game, either one of those games. I remember like, oh my God, when I found this weapon, that was like the best moment ever.
Yes, exactly.
Right, and that I think is fundamentally different from something like BioShock, where. In BioShock, there were different lootable. When you say lootable, also, I think it's just that mechanic of searching for something, right? So the audio logs, I would consider that a sort of, a loot item. It's something you're looking for to find them, kind of thing.
Right.
And those were pretty important to that game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so.
So could they have been dropped right in the path more? Maybe. So I think like games like Diablo 3. Borderlands, whose central mechanic is looting, one of their main central mechanics, it's kind of a different story.
I think maybe that's the thing, because that was in a sense that was the point I was kind of making on The Last of Us. I felt like the looting was such a central part of that. That game. I
agree. I concur with that.
I can't imagine what The Last of Us would be like if there wasn't looting. I guess is what it ultimately boils down to.
Try and imagine The Last of Us without the looting, but with a mechanic that in a reasonable way, and I can't think of one off the top of my head except for maybe just the story itself and where you have to go because of the story. Yeah. But imagine if you said no looting in The Last of Us, but that didn't stop you from having to go inside of these houses and see the real people that lived there. Like if you could still have that piece, but the looting itself, the need to pick up string but
it would be like a purely player initiated thing, like just because you're curious and you want to, you do.
No. I'm saying somehow they make another design decision.
Okay.
That creates that, because that was a very powerful emotional experience. The Last of Us.
Yeah.
And so I think it's fundamental to that game. And so you don't want to leave that up to player, player volition. But if they created another mechanic that sort of necessitated that you do that, And then they removed the looting. So to get whatever the looting was used for, you were building, I assume, what were you building with the looting stuff? Like first aid kits and stuff like that, I guess?
Well, yeah, you built first aid kits, you built nail bombs, you built lock picks.
Right. So imagine imagine the nail bombs and the lock picks and the first aid kits were obtained by some other method.
Yeah.
Right, where I don't know what that would be. When you kill the enemy, they pop out of them, or when you get to a certain checkpoint,
but isn't that kind of
a safe house?
Like this sort of fun guy's zombie guy just happened to drop a nail bomb. Thanks.
Well, it could be. I mean, it's a convention of the genre that we sort of expect in the context of. We expect ammo to just fall out of people, kind of thing. But you're right. Like maybe it's
the whole point. You're taking the ammo that they had that they were shooting at. They were using to shoot at you up until the moment you killed them, and now you're taking that ammo from them.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I'm just talking about the idea of stuff popping out of enemies. But so maybe it's a safe house. Every 10 minutes you happen in one of the houses you find that they lead you through has a place where you can restockpile a limited amount of things, or I don't know, some other reasonable thing that doesn't require you looting to do it.
Well, I can certainly think of games that don't involve looting. Well, I mean, Shadow of Mordor as an example. Not a lot of looting going on in that game.
Well, and what do you notice about that, Brent? I mean, I think what it is I think it affects pacing.
Yeah,
looting changes the pacing.
I agree. I think maybe that's the fundamental thing that we're kind of talking about. At least for us, is that looting does change the pacing of the game, and although I can't necessarily think of anything right now, I can't think of an example of a game that had looting mechanics that I thought detracted from it. But I'm not saying that it's never happened. I'm just maybe not coming up with anything right off the top of my head. However, I can concede the point that I've played games where looting draws your eye away from the game world, and you kind of get tunnel visioned into search this room, search this cupboard, search this shelf, find stuff to craft, sell, use, whatever. So I think what we ought to do is turn it over to the audience and let them sound off on games that they've played where maybe this has worked well, maybe not worked well, and what specifically about it they found to work well or not, as the case may be. Again, another discussion, sprawling discussion on a game mechanic that I think maybe a lot of us take for granted. It's like, well, what else are you going to do if you don't loot in games? Well, that'd be a great question. If anybody's got any suggestions, answer that question.
And pay attention. Yeah. Pay attention as you're playing. After you listen to this episode over the next few days, pay attention and see. I think it's almost sort of insidious in that we don't notice, kind of like that HUD element. We don't really notice how it affects gaming, but I encourage people to start paying attention and see how the things affect pacing and how much pacing, that feeling of forward momentum and moving through a game instead of just being in a game, how that changes your relationship to the experience. And so,
good point.
I would encourage you to sort of look at it and then come back here and write about it. Damn it.
Yes. All right, guys, it's time to hit the road, saddle up, and let's talk about what we've been playing this week. More of the same for most of this section. Lauren, you're going to talk a little bit more about Bloodborne. Have you been able to decide whether or not you like this game or not yet?
It is on sale for $40 on Craigslist right now. If you would like to buy it from me,
that's an answer.
So here's the thing. We had a listener in our comments from last week who said he's been waiting every week for me to come back and talk about loving this game. And why is it different if I love Dark Souls 2 so much, or Dark Souls so much, what's so different about this? And the truth is I can't put my finger on it, to be honest. I'm not sure what is making that experience different. But the fact is that I'm not loving it. And I haven't been compelled to go back and play it. I look at it and I don't want to put it in the disc drive, honestly. And, I maybe I'll revisit it at some point, but it's just really, I mean, I played a good 10 to 12 hours of the game probably, and I just don't think it's for me. And so I put it up for sale on Craigslist and see if somebody wants to take it off my hands, or I'll sell it on eBay or whatever. And it's not doing it for me. So I think it's time to move on from Bloodborne, Brent.
I would have to agree with you, sir. It's I guess that my feeling on it was just very brief. If you were going to like that game, you would have known already. You know, that's kind of how I felt.
Yeah.
You know, like there's times when, although I don't know, I say that I'm not really necessarily thinking of video games. I'm trying to think if there's games I've played that I've just been like, no, I don't like this. No, I don't like this. And then all of a sudden, hey, I like it. Not so much that, although I mean, I'll be honest, I've had to take a stab at a couple of games before I actually sort of got into them enough to keep going. There have been games that I've started and stopped and had to start and stop before I got into it, but I've never played anything as long as you had, not really being sure if I liked it or not.
No, but I press, a game like that, and like the Last of Us or whatever, that has something like a 93 on Metacritic and is just universally loved.
Yeah.
I feel like it deserves a little bit more of my time, and it never clicked for me.
Yeah, I got you.
I apologize to our listeners who've been wanting me to come on and talk about how great Bloodborne is, because I know we have a lot of people that love the game, but it's just not working for me right now.
You never apologized to me for not liking The Last of Us, you son of a... Anyway, moving on, I'm playing Skyrim. Still.
Love it.
Again.
Love it.
Loving it. My God, this is... there's a game... Not exactly the same as what we were just talking about, but there's a game it's taken me years to discover just how much I love. Not because I never thought I would dislike it or anything, but just because it was such... I played it initially on the PlayStation 3, and I had that big problem, and then I stopped playing it, and eventually I got it on the PC, but never really did anything with it, and it was just so intimidating. It was just so intimidating because I knew it was going to be a game that was going to require a lot of time, and after my daughter was born, I didn't have a lot of time, so on and so forth. But boy, now that I'm playing it, I basically the sort of like the downtime that I have, that hour after Z goes to bed, a couple hours in the morning before she wakes up. I mean, that's pretty much me playing Skyrim, and I'm definitely not doing everything in the game as my inclination is to do. Every side quest and all that stuff. I just can't, but the immersiveness of the world, the great feeling of trekking around, of going and discovering new places, the political intrigue and all of that stuff, man, it's just working for me so much. The kind of the struggle between the Nords and the Empire, and the not so subtle, kind of undertones of the actual Norse and the Roman Empire, and all of these things, that there being this whole angle to the story that the Empire's coming in, they want to outlaw worshiping Talos, the native god of the Nords, and the parallels to what why the Viking Age actually ended, and the sweep of Christianity through that part of Europe. It's just engaging me on so many levels, and it's not to say that I wouldn't necessarily enjoy other titles in the Elder Scrolls series, but this one, having such a strong kind of connection to my interest in Viking history and mythology and everything, is particularly well suited for me. And I think, as I said earlier, I'm kind of on the downhill slope of the main story quest now. It feels like I'm moving through that at a pretty good clip. And I really, really would like to, I think, maybe finish that up and just have my game save with a whole bunch of those side quests left in the world that I can go and just play the game in kind of a sandbox mode, and go and enjoy some of that stuff and enjoy the world, experiment with mods and things like that. But I'm really looking forward to seeing the story through at this point.
Yeah, such a great game, man. I had such a good time playing that game.
Me too.
All right, Brett, I really want to talk about, just for a few minutes, The Order 1886. I finished the game this week.
Okay.
And it is honestly one of the most unique game-playing experiences I've ever had in my life. And the reason it's one of the most unique experiences I've ever had is because it is at once one of, if not the most beautifully visually games I've ever played. It is, the world building in the game is fantastic. The voice acting is among the best I have ever seen in any video game that didn't have Mark Hamill in it.
With that one caveat.
I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, it's like benchmark setting. It's incredible. It really is, more than any other game I've played, like a benchmark for this generation of consoles. It is phenomenally polished visually, and the characters and their animations, and it just looks incredible. At the same time, it is dazzlingly poorly designed from a game standpoint, and to the point that it's almost unbelievable.
It
It's
does so
weird
many
because
things right, except being a game.
it really is. I encourage people to play it when it comes down in price to $10 or $20 because it's worth looking at as an experiment. But it is. They took this amazing set of tools they have, and they just, I said it before, Brent, it's like the difference between a melody and just like this series of staccato notes. And it's just from beginning to end, you almost never go more than 45 seconds to a minute having control of the character. And it's so weird. But they have one of the best tool sets in the history of video games. And if they had just gotten out of their own way, they could have had a game of the year.
Right.
It's that compelling. The world is that cool. The weapons are, everything in the world is so beautifully realized, and the characters are captivating. And Sir Galahad, the lead character, is fantastic. And I think you would love this world, Brent, and the relationship with Tesla and the weapons.
Oh, yeah.
And the weapons were fun. But they just, I think in an attempt to make a very cinematic game, they went overboard, and what is astounding to me is that nobody in the leadership of this company recognized it because it's so egregious.
Yeah.
And I want to keep the game because the world was so compelling, but there's no point in playing the game over. There's no reason to play it over. And they just put out this really robust photo mode to the game today. I think the update came out to take pictures of these gorgeous environments, and all I could think is why would you spend any time doing this 3 months after this game came out when the game is not good?
Yeah.
It's gorgeous, but nobody's going to be playing the game moving forward, I don't think. And it's really weird. It's really amazing, Brent. It's really like beautiful, just like unbelievably beautiful
Failure.
well acted, super interesting failure. And I enjoyed it, but it just I don't want to go back and play it again because I can't sit through another 10 hours of stopping and starting every 60 seconds. And Brent, I don't know if you remember that I told you last week that I was only through chapter 8 and that I wanted to finish the game, but
yeah.
I was only through chapter 8 and there were 16 chapters. Well, I came to find out after that at least 2, if not 3 of the chapters in the game are just cutscenes.
What?
You literally, it literally says chapter 13
cutscene,
and then there's about
14.
6 minutes of cutscene.
Wow.
And then it says chapter 14.
Wow. That seems.
And it's weird. You look at chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, and there's 3 to 5 parts in them, and then the last 5 chapters of the game,
one part,
all have only 2 parts. Yeah. Or 1 part. It was really.
Do you think
it was? Go ahead. Ask
do
me
you think
questions.
that this gets fixed by a sequel? Do you think that the fundamentals of the game, the mythos, the characters, etc., do you think it's strong enough that they could come back and say, okay, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? Let's do another game, and let's keep the good, dispatch the bad, and maybe get to something that is quite good.
Yeah, I genuinely, without knowing what's going on at the company, and I do not mean this to be disrespectful to the company, but honestly, I do think the mythos in the world and the tool set is good enough that it absolutely deserves a sequel. I don't mean this disrespectfully, but I think it needs to be either made by another company or they need to get rid of many of the people in leadership, because clearly there was obviously a director and a head of production, and there were all these lead people involved in this, and not one of them, at least not anyone with enough power, was able to stop this from happening. And so I 100% think this game deserves a sequel. I 100% think that it can be fixed in a sequel. It just needs to be made by a different company.
All right. Well,
yeah.
I'll keep an eye and see if it goes on sale, or maybe it becomes a freebie with PSN Plus at some point, and then maybe.
Yeah, so when that happens, it's worth your time to check it out, because it's that kind of. It was cool enough and pretty enough that it kept me going and wanting to. I actually wanted to play through it. I wasn't playing through it begrudgingly, but I was sort of annoyed a lot of the time that I was playing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk briefly about, and I don't want you to talk too much because I really want to play the game for myself.
No, there's not much for me to talk about. I just started playing
but yeah, Sherlock Holmes, Crimes and Punishments.
Yeah, so on the heels of finishing the Order 1886 and being done with Bloodborne, I was looking for another game to play. Now I was able to just make my PS4 my primary, Brent, which means I could get my game saves for Dragon Age, which is awesome because now I want to play it again. However, I was in the store and Target had this game on sale for $30. It's a game that has been very well reviewed. And I've had my eye on it for a while, but I just wasn't really, $60 was too high of a price point for me. Well, they had it on sale for $30. So I picked it up, Sherlock Holmes Crimes and Punishment. And I've really only played about the first 10 minutes of the game, but I'm very excited to get into it. And, I'll have more to report to you next week. Right now, I don't have a lot to report, except that, the beginning has been fun, but I haven't played. This is from Focus Interactive and Frogware, and I haven't played any of the games in the Sherlock Holmes series from them. In the Sherlock Holmes series. So the mechanics are all new to me and all of that. And so I'll have more to report on that next week. But picked it up. Excited to check it out.
I'm excited to hear about it. I also, this is the one that was on PSN Plus, and I got it as well.
PSN Plus.
PSN Plus. I keep meaning to play. It was on the PS3, and I keep meaning to check it out. I like in Skyrim, I just finished, there's like a side quest in Windhelm where you're investigating a murder. I just finished up that side quest recently, and I love it. We talked about LA Noire. I love the idea of detective games. It's one of, that Detective D Kickstarter that I talked about on the show. I love that. I love the idea of detective games. There's something so compelling to me about doing that, and I'm always looking for ones to check out. See what they do well, and all that kind of thing. I'm down for it.
Yeah. So did you say that you picked this up on PS3?
I got, if it's the same one, if it's Crimes and Punishments that was on PSN Plus,
it is
last month, and I've got it.
Oh, good. You should check it out. It's supposed to be very good. So I'll let you know.
Cool.
All right, Brent. With that, I believe we've come to the end of yet another episode.
Yes, indeed.
Of Outlaw Gamer Radio. And as usual, we want to hear what you, the listener, has to say about everything we talked about, including Sherlock Holmes, Crimes and Punishments, The Order, 1886, Skyrim, and Bloodborne. What we talked about while we were hanging out in the clubhouse, whether or not you think looting or scavenging as a mechanic in games breaks immersion, or maybe if you think it's works particularly well in some games, or feel like it's just being overused. Any of your thoughts on looting and scavenging, we'd like to hear about. And of course, what we talked about in the garage, Trine 3, woohoo, the Artifact of Power, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, and the announcement of Deus Ex, Mankind Divided. We want to hear your thoughts on all of those things and anything related to gaming. That's why we're here. We want to hear what you have to say. As usual, he is Brent Adams. I am Lauren Baumgart. And remember, you don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing.